This whole thing was completely buried. To this moment, the New York Times has not published anything to suggest that Charlie Kirk had any kind of breach with the Israelis. They can't, because if they did, they would be faced with the question that brought you and I together: who benefited from this assassination?
A.J. Liebling. He was a famous journalist, press critic, and prolific columnist at The New Yorker. He died in 1963, and you probably have never heard of him. But there's this old line from Liebling which goes, "Freedom of the press is guaranteed only to those who own one." How very true. Well, that's the exact line. It hits different when you look at what happened to Patrick Lawrence. See, Patrick spent decades out there, Tokyo, Washington, all over the place, writing for the International Herald Tribune and the rest. Real journalism. The kind that tries to peel back the layers, not just echo what the powerful say. I mean, that's what journalism is supposed to be about. But over time, something shifted. The press stopped digging and started amplifying. And if you didn't play along, if you didn't keep to the script, you were just out. Ask Anna Cheng. Patrick saw it happening in real time. Or more than that, he felt it. His work, his instincts, his refusal to just recycle official narratives, it all started pushing him to the margins. Not because he lost his edge, because he's as sharp as ever, but because the system lost its tolerance for the edge. So now he's out there doing his own thing, writing where still can speak freely on the kind of platforms that old media considers unrespectable. Which, if you're being honest, are probably the last places where Liebling's idea of press freedom still breathes. Now, in the following conversation, we go deep. It's not just about news stories, it's about fault lines. We are moving through these headline tragedies and the unspoken stuff right beneath them. Take Charlie Kirk, his assassination. Whatever you thought of the man, it didn't just end a career. It cracked a mirror wide open, virtually. Suddenly people are asking, who decides what can be said? Who gets silenced? And what happens when the line between being an ally, of Israel in this instance, and crossing a power's invisible fence gets blurred? And of course, Gaza. As I'm recording this, a ceasefire has been signed, but if you read my recent article, you will question what really is behind it. Whatever the case, Gaza never leaves the frame. It's right here, raw and constant. Not some faraway crisis, but the living proof of what happens when politics turns into violence and genocide stops being a debate word and becomes a reality people are actually dying in. Then there is this bigger shadow. What happens to the strong man? Or the ones still climbing the ladder? Because every era has its own would-be dictator, right? And Trump, well, his name hangs virtually in the air. Less as a person now, but more a symbol. A kind of warring sign flashing red. Or orange, no pun intended. It's about how fast populism can slide into something much darker. Especially in a country where loyalty to America and loyalty to Israel keeps getting merged on purpose. All of it. Kirk, Gaza, the rise of Trump as a strongman, the slow Zionisation of American politics. It's not random. It's a pattern. You can almost trace the pressure points like a map, what you're not supposed to talk about. And that's exactly what we're doing here. Tracing them out loud. Saying the quiet parts for anyone still curious enough to listen. So if any of this hits home, subscribe, and more importantly, hit the bell, because YouTube's latest trick is to suppress this kind of content even if you're subscribed. And I'm not kidding. So do whatever helps you to stay tuned. But more than that, talk to us. Do you feel the same squeeze in your own country? That slow narrowing of what you're allowed to question? And if you could, what's the one question you'd ask that the mainstream will never touch? I am serious. If something resonates, I might pick it up and make a piece of it, as I did with this interview suggested by Alfredo Gianantonio. Drop it in the comments. I'm reading every single one. Let's see how far this conversation can go before somebody tries to shut it down again. Patrick Lawrence, what a pleasure having you. How are you?
I'm well, thank you, Thomas, and it's nice to meet you, having admired your work for quite some while.
I mean, I'm humbled that this comes from someone like you, and my audience will know in a moment, because you're not just some journalist, and I wouldn't be able to memorize all of that. You have worked nearly 30 years in overseas as a correspondent and columnist, mainly for International Herald Tribune, The New Yorker, Far Eastern Economic Review, then frequent contributor to major outlets, the New York Times, the Times, the Nation, Foreign Affairs columnist, Salon, the Washington Quarterly, and many more. You have often appeared on TV and radio, of course, lectured widely on foreign affairs, media criticism, and geopolitics. That's our topic here.
Yes.
You're very experienced in every country in Asia. You have basically covered. You have nearly every country in Asia. You have won Overseas Press Club Award for career reportage during the dictatorship years. There was something happening. There was a kind of coup attempt not so long ago in South Korea, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And you served as the news editor of the Herald Tribune's Asia edition. Now, if that's not enough, then you have also published 5 books and you're writing on a 6th. Is that correct?
I published 6. I'm writing the 7th.
Sorry, my bad. Okay, one more. Good. And then, of course, you focus on media analysis, including decline of journalism. And this is something I would really like to discuss with you. And, the critic of the media, also the mainstream media's relationship to power, which is quite incestuous at the moment. Okay. Now, before I hand the microphone over to you, I would like to briefly explain how we came in contact. And I have to give credit to one of my viewers. His name is Alfred Gianantonio. Now I got it right. Gianantonio.
Alfred and I correspond by mail. He's a very good fellow and a dedicated supporter. I haven't met him personally, but I greatly appreciate his enthusiasm. I think he lives in Genoa.
I do not know. I would suspect he lives somewhere in Italy, but he pointed out to me that you were kind enough to reference one of my articles in your work. And this brings me back to the very beginning, that I'm really honored having you, because you are someone really in the top league of international journalists, with credentials going also spanning 30 years. So thank you very much being here. Now, one last thing. I have a couple of things here. So you publish on a number of outlets. So the Flutist, I think that's on Substack. You are also on Consortium News and also on SheerPost. Have I forgotten any of the outlets that you're currently publishing?
No, Consortium News and SheerPost are kind of a independent media's version of a newspaper. And I'm one of their contributors regularly. The Flautist is my Substack newsletter. I co-edit it with my wife and colleague, Cara Mariana, and she publishes a series of pieces on there called Palestinian Voices, based on her journeys in the West Bank.
That's interesting in itself, and I may come back to you on that one.
Okay.
Okay. There was, of course, and again, this is off script. There was, of course, a happening a couple of days ago where Peter Hegseth summoned 800 or so American generals which, let's just say, which caused quite this stir. As
Hmm.
far as you can comment, yeah, what was this about?
Interesting question, Tom. Very interesting question, because Hegseth is a foolish fellow, essentially a buffoon, a minor officer in the Army Reserve, who served quite briefly in Iraq and, to his shame, Guantanamo Bay. And he convened, my number is 800 admirals and generals in Washington from all over the world to lecture them about personal comportment and hygiene, where we will not tolerate beards anymore, et cetera, et cetera. Uh, it made no sense. It raises the question you've posed. What I am hearing, we don't know for certain, but what I am hearing from people whose judgment I trust uh, is that the 800 attendees served as a kind of cover, that the real intent may, note my verb, may have been to convene with Central Command, which is the Middle East, and Southern Command, which is Latin America, uh, uh, possibly concerning attacks on Iran and Venezuela. Uh, and the thought, uh, this is from, among others, Larry Johnson, very well regarded former uh, CIA man, right? Um, he suggests that the intent was to bring the Central Command and Southern Command top officials to Washington, but if they brought them there alone, it there would have been exposure or a strong suggestion of a plan. So let's bring 800 of them, and we have our private talks with what they call CENTCOM and SOUTHCOM, uh, away from the cameras, if you follow the reasoning. I find it interesting, but I think what we can say with certainty is there was way more to this convention than meets the eye.
I actually interviewed Larry a while back.
Oh,
Really
good.
interesting personality. Concerning this meeting or prep talk, or different commentator view it differently. From Peter Hegseth, it was quite a show, and it could have had the purpose of kind of establishing his, how shall I say this, credibility or dominance, or however you call it. But I don't think, and according to all these interviews that I watched about this, that kind of backfired. What's
Hmm.
what's your vision here?
Well, uh, Hegseth has made a considerable fool of himself since taking office. And it seems plain that he has not earned the respect of officers of vastly greater experience and qualification. So he has an authority problem. There's no question of that. And what you're suggesting is also entirely true. He needed to get in front of these people and sort of strut around and and assert his authority, right? A little background for your viewers. Behind him was an immense, as in very immense, American flag, and it was pointed out that the setting was a reproduction of George Patton's famous speeches to the Third Army prior to the invasion of France, um, as portrayed in the movie Patton, right? So it adds another layer to this whole thing. We have a Secretary of Defense and maybe an administration um, that trades not in substance but in imagery and appearances and sheer presentations. Right? I think what you're suggesting is quite plausible. Uh, on the other side of this coin, I don't think it cancels out the thoughts of people like Larry Johnson. It could have been both of these things, right? I think we can go home with the thought that it was an extremely bizarre thing to do, um, and it adds to a list of a rather lengthy list of other bizarre things Pete Hegseth has done, right? And as you suggest, I'm fully in agreement. It did not uh, establish or enhance Hegseth's authority over the military. I think it was deleterious. It backfired, as you say.
He was, of course, Fox News anchor for some time, as I understood,
Yeah,
which is in line with Trump himself, who's kind of a media guy. Yeah.
yeah,
So, it becomes more and more a circuit. Yeah. And then there comes a quote to mind that came from someone much wiser than I am, who said, if the clown goes into if the clown goes into the palace, the clown doesn't become king, but the palace becomes a circuit. And
very good. Who
this
said
is,
that?
I wish I knew. I heard it a while ago. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah. And if you look at this whole orchestration of the Trump organization, and also, like the education minister and all these people who have absolutely no whatsoever qualification for their
No,
posts,
no.
and then look back at other dictators who did the same, and look at how it ended with them. And now I already called Trump a dictator. I need to be mindful here. Yeah? But I believe that's the direction we're going. Huh?
Of course, it's a strong word. I don't think he is one yet, but
Yet.
and I don't think he can become one. American institutions are in a very weak position, but I think it's quite important for certainly for my kind, for journalists, independent journalists, to avoid hyperbole at all costs because it discredits us. I think he's in the direction of a dictatorship, but I don't think I don't think uh, the American this I don't think America, by way of its institutions and so forth, is it's in that direction, but it's not there yet.
I fully agree it's not there yet, but I don't exclude that it could become that because there is a seamless overflow from populism into authoritarianism.
Hmm.
And as an outsider, again, I live here in the Netherlands, where again in these interviews I consciously make it very black and white. I'm aware, yeah, but we see similar trends on a smaller scale, of course. I grant you that, but we see similar trends. So it's not only an American phenomenon, this kind of populism shift and then
Yeah.
direction authoritarianism.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we need. I was thinking before we got on camera. Uh, I think we reach a moment where we need to step back uh, and develop sort of larger kind of meta narratives as to what's going on in the world, right? The narrative of total control, the narrative of Zionization, right? And this is another one. The the I'm not going to say the rise of authoritarianism. I'm going to say the uh, the extravagant excesses of what we call centrists. Right? The centrists in Germany, France, Britain, they are. they are in the way of uh, a kind of, how do I put it? They uh, they show every sign of willingness to dismantle all democratic institutions and procedures, democratic process, voting, and so forth. The Germans, the 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 centrist coalition is barely hanging on, so they outlaw parties, populist parties, and candidates, um, ban them from running in elections. The same thing's going on eastern part of Europe. The Czechs, the Moldova situation, Romania. You know, it's it's another narrative. The the centrists, the the anti-democratic impulses of the centrists. Now, in America, it's a bit upside down. We can't call Donald Trump a centrist, right? But we need to understand how Donald Trump got there, and this was by way of the excesses of the centrist Democratic Party. So
Fully
all these
agree.
different ways of looking at things. Another one of these larger narratives, the Russia situation, right? Patrick Bob was just talking about the dedication of Europeans to a total war with Russia at all costs to domestic economies, political processes, national finances, and all the rest of it, right? Yeah,
Incidentally, I also interviewed Patrick Barb,
he's
also a
good
very
people. He's very good people,
yes,
Patrick. We're friends. I met him in Berlin this past
yes,
summer.
also very courageous. I mean, this
Yeah,
guy went on his own without a big corporation behind him in the battle zone in Russia and on both sides. On Ukraine, which is, if I remember correctly, he wrote a book called "On Both Sides," based on this experience being in the battle zone in Ukraine, but also on Russia.
yeah, yeah,
A very courageous guy. Yeah,
yeah. Patrick is Patrick's a member of a sort of informal, undeclared fraternity. I suppose I'm another member. Trained in mainstream media, which is a good thing. You acquire a proper professional standards and so forth, methods. Um, but exiled from mainstream media. Um, John Pilger, the late John Pilger, is
yeah. Very sad
uh,
that he died. Very sad.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly that situation. My editor at Consortium News, Joe Luria, is another one. Chris Hedges is another one. You know, I think this little group, and I'm pleased enough to be a member of it. I think this little group is important because refugees from the mainstream are properly trained and know how media works, right? A lot of independent practitioners, you know, they're doing good work, okay, but standards are not what they should be in many cases, you know. And it's kind of a independent media. We're going off on another topic. It needs some professional backbone, some high standards. That's my strong feeling.
Yeah.
Patrick's part of
This
that.
Absolutely. But again, this puts you in this little circle, and I have quite a number of guests on my channel who have suffered the consequences for speaking out. Most recently, Anna Chen. She was a broadcaster for the BBC for I don't know how many years, and
Uh-huh,
then when her voice became too critical in regards to China, in regards to the mainstream narrative about China,
uh-huh.
she was just as virtually disappeared till today.
Really?
Yeah, yeah,
What's
yeah.
become of her?
She is still writing and publishing on certain instances. What exactly she does professionally, I do not know. I only know she's a writer, a poet. There was some theater involved. There are some plays even. Yeah, all with a slightly critical voice in regards to China. But apparently that didn't go down well with the BBC. And then I think in 2011 was the last time that she was allowed to broadcast. Yeah.
It's a special pity because the mainstream story on China is urgently in need of attack, right? Of criticism, and there aren't many voices out there doing this. Some, but she sounds like a very formidable correspondent, and that's the way it
Yeah.
goes.
That's the way it goes. Yes.
Yeah,
So, and this is also, I believe, a trend that will continue and will accelerate
yeah.
with these growing trends to authoritarianism. This will accelerate. And not only that, I mean, my minuscule Twitter channel has been permanently suspended due to what was it? Authenticity violations, what nobody knows what it is. Yeah. All I'm doing is I'm posting shorts of my interviews from people like you on Twitter, permanently suspended. Even they threaten me if I try to create a new account, blah, blah, blah. I got the whole email from them. Yeah.
You're
So
kidding.
no, even small voices like mine are already under pressure. I can't imagine how it is for. I mean, I know from Patrick, if you for viewers, if
Hmm.
anyone is interested, he describes pressure on journalism from just for going to Russia and etc. Yeah,
Let me make
so
a
it's
point
massive.
here. Let me make a point here. Mention to your listeners, I published a book about a year and a half ago called Journalists and Their Shadows. Um, it came out in English, and then my Swiss friends did a translation into German. I'll attempt the journal uh, Journalisten und ihr Schatten. How did I do?
I try to figure out what you just said. Come again?
let me let me go to the other side of the room and get a copy of it, may I?
Okay, sure, sure. Gut, Journalists, okay, Journalists and their shadows, Journalisten und ihre Schatten. Yes, yes,
Yeah, yeah,
yes.
yeah. I
Now I get
guess
it.
I guess my German needs some practice. Well, anyway, it came out from a very good house in Vienna called Pro Media. Okay, but much better received in among German-speaking readers than it has been in America. More or less dead silence. But my point here is, my points here are two. Number one, I make the argument in the book. The book takes up quite a number of topics, and the narrative thread is my own professional career. Um, but I make the point that the dynamism of the profession unquestionably lies with independent media now. Uh, Mainstream media are derelict. Uh, we need to talk about the relationship between media and power. Okay. Um, but point one, the vitality of the profession lies with independent media. This imposes a very considerable responsibility on us, um, and our resources are not uh, commensurate with these responsibilities, but that doesn't matter. It still holds that the future of the profession lies in independent media. It lies in what you and I are doing right now. Point one. Point two, what you said about X. Independent media are digital technologies made independent media possible as we have them now. Okay. From the earliest years of my career back in the 70s, I I had a mainstream job, okay, New York Times, whatever, um, where I was an editor for a time. But I was always moonlighting, if you know this term. I was always moonlighting with an independent publication, and that was independent media then. There was no internet, nothing like that. It was a completely different scene. Digital media has made possible this explosion in independent media, but as your case indicates, it also presents independent media with a very critical vulnerability. We are dependent on digital media, but uh, technologies. You know Jacques Ellul, the French sort of anarchist professor at Bordeaux, no longer with us, but he was excellent on two topics, propaganda and technologies. He made the argument technologies are not, to summarize what he said, technologies are not value neutral. They reflect the political economy that produced them. And these digital technologies are, of course, the products of highly advanced capitalist means of production, etc. And they can be taken away from us at any moment. So they are our strength, our our ace, as we would say in American English. But they're also our vulnerability. This is something I don't have an answer to this question other than to say, as I do in the book, we need to learn to live with it, right?
There is an answer, if I may. There is an answer. We need decentralized Web3 based, as a blockchain based social media. That's the answer. And there are already a couple of very interesting projects running. And if I'm lucky, next week, Wednesday, I will talk to a founder of just such a social media platform, which is so threatening to the mainstream platforms that she had to migrate to Russia. I mean, it's that serious, this competition with
Really?
the. Yes, yes,
So people are
yes.
thinking about this question, I take it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well,
Absolutely.
that's good to know. That's good to know.
Absolutely. So I would like to come one more time back to the article which brought us into contact.
Mhm.
So this article, and this is also a second topic before I go in the main topics that I would like to discuss with you. That's the
Okay.
second after Peter Hegseth, the Charlie Kirk assassination not so long ago. Now, my article was quite extensive, and it was not about the Charlie Kirk assassination per se. It was about how the Trump administration and Netanyahu, virtually 20 minutes after the bullet, already utilized this incident for their purposes, for their strategic purposes. Maybe you want to pick it up from here.
Yeah. Well, that piece, you did a long piece, but you also did a sort of a 23-minute webcast on it. It was excellent work, right?
Thank you
Um,
again. Coming
it's
from
uh,
you, really. Thank you.
it, it's uh, it's it's just completely unnatural that uh, the not he's not head of state, that the prime minister of a nation could come out like that within 20 minutes, as you pointed out. These sort of things, these sort of things are discussed in councils of government, formulated, drafted, reviewed, approved, and all the rest of it. That's just the way government works. So it's a very, very strong suggestion of Israeli foreknowledge, and we again we must be careful. We must be responsible. What do we know, and what do we surmise? They're very different. Uh, I just say strong, strong indications of Israeli involvement. As I said in that piece that brings us together, cui bono, to whom goes the good here, right? Mainstream media. Mainstream, it is it is understood among people who pay attention that Kirk had begun to turn against Israel, not because he is he was necessarily anti-Israel or anti-Zionist, or certainly not anti-Semitic, but because of the gross intrusions of the Israelis into the American political process, right? Into the halls of government. You get people like this, they're they're perfectly in favor of the Israeli cause, but they're the same sort of people who are uh, 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 national American nationalists, right? We don't use the word nationalism in America. We say patriotic, but what we mean is nationalist, right? And Kirk was in this group. Uh, uh, as we got to mention Max Blumenthal here. He did exceptional work exposing Kirk's split from the Israelis, again, because he was furious at the grotesque amount of influence the Israelis exercise in the American government. They practically own Trump, right? This whole thing was completely buried. To this moment, the New York Times has not published anything to suggest that Charlie Kirk had any kind of breach with the Israelis. They can't, because if they did, they would be faced with the question that brought you and I together: who benefited from this assassination, right? We had a report this morning, my wife and I, a Tucker Carlson program, uh, detailing how during the attacks on Iran, the bombing campaigns and everything, the Israelis call this the 12-day war. A little bit of melodrama, right? It wasn't a 12-day war. It wasn't even a war, right? But during that time, Israeli military officials and intel people, I gather, were in the Pentagon bursting into uh, meetings of senior Pentagon officials saying, "You must do this now. You must do this now." Right? Uh, Absolutely shocking. Right? Shocking. It leads to the point I made earlier. The Zionization of the United States is quite amazing, and we are not alone in this. So back to Kirk. I um, the the story that this fellow Tyler Robinson was a lone shooter has collapsed like a badly made souffle at this point. None of it makes sense. He is supposed to have fired a, a rifle called a 30-06. That's a rather high-powered hunting rifle manufactured by a company called Mauser, right? Um,
Sounds very German.
yeah, right. Uh, a 30-06 could not possibly have been the murder weapon based on forensics people have done since then, and examinations of the wound and so forth. The entry wound uh, that what was advertised as the entry wound in the early days is now understood to be an exit wound. So what happened, right? And Tyler Robinson, for my money, we've got another Lee Harvey Oswald on our hands here, right? Um, And I'm not the first to suggest that echoes of the Kennedy administration. Honestly, Thomas, I'm not sure what we will ever know when about what happened. And that's another reason for me strongly to suspect, and I draw my line there, strongly to suspect that the Israelis were the responsible party here, right? And your piece was, very. It was early days. I think it was a day or two after you wrote. Yeah, yeah. Your piece was quite key in the progress of my own thinking, and it
Oh,
hasn't
thank
been
you.
refuted. Your analysis of social psychology stuff and all that, right? Very good.
The kind of the Israeli angle was one part of the story, but I think the main angle, well, it's kind of mixed, was how the Trump administration right away used this incident to blame the left.
Mm.
And again, this is an old playbook. I have here, if you allow me, a whole list of countries where this is an extremely old playbook to either cause an incident or use an incident orchestrated by the right to blame the left. And if you allow me, just a couple
Yeah.
of countries. Israel, Warsaw led from the 1960s to the 1980s. I should mention Dr. Daniel Ganser, who wrote his PhD on Project Gladio, the
Yes,
stay behind armies.
yeah, your history is invaluable. What went
Oh,
on in
thank you.
Italy in the 70s and all that. Yeah. Anyway,
That means
Gladio.
the
Yeah.
That means NATO sponsored, trained, maintained kind of underground armies, executed terrorist acts, killed people, bombed people in multiple European countries, and blamed it on the left, the
A,
communists, whatever.
a
Yeah.
long menu of provocations. Yeah.
A long one, yeah. Germany, West Germany, from the 1970s to the 1980s. Turkey, 1970 to 1980. Spain, Franco's, even post-Franco. Greece, the junta and the aftermath. Latin America, of course. Argentina, Chile, Brazil. I mean, the
Mm,
list is
mm,
just.
mm.
I mean, I'm pointing. There is a playbook that's that's ready, that's being rolled out here, and that I think that's my main argument in the article, because I am personally very concerned about this shift into authoritarianism,
Yeah.
and not only in the US. That's my point.
Now, I was discussing this with my wife, Kara, last night, right? We, uh, we Americans have this idea of ourselves. It can't happen here. All these crazy things happen elsewhere, but they can't happen here. No, we're Americans. We're the world's good people, et cetera, et cetera. If you've ever spent any time in America, you breathe the air, right? I call it apple pie authoritarianism, right? That's so it emphatically can happen here, and it is happening here, but in a rather odd way for the majority of Americans, it's completely invisible because it's apple pie tyranny, apple pie authoritarianism, right? That's my term for it.
There were
Yeah.
lots of people on the Titanic who believed till the last moment the ship is
Exactly.
unsinkable. Okay. Now, coming back to what you said before, and you used a special phrase as the Zionismization. How did you call it? The
Zionize, the
Zionismization
Zionization of America.
of America. Now, if you allow me, and I don't mean this, how shall I say this? Not to make too much self promotion, yeah, but 2 days ago I published an article about how, this whole TikTok story, yeah, which
Yeah,
supposedly, should protect us from China, also should protect America from China. I have a tech background. This is my profession. I can tell you this is absolute, utter nonsense. Yeah.
yeah,
So my argument in this article is that it's just being used because, and I have a clip from I have a clip from Netanyahu where he says it himself. Number one target TikTok and X, also Twitter. I will use this.
Is this that symposium he gave after his UN appearance, where
It could be. It could be.
he's talking
Yeah,
about how we must control social media?
exactly that piece.
Yeah.
And what we have to do is we have to secure that part of the base of our support in the United States. That is being challenged systematically. A lot of this is done with money. Money of NGOs, vast. Money of governments, vaster. Okay? We have to fight back. How do we fight back? Our influencers. I think you should also talk to them if you have a chance. To that community, they're very important. And secondly, we're going to have to use the tools of battle. You know, the weapons change over time. You can't fight today with swords. That doesn't work very well. Okay, and you can't fight with cavalry. That doesn't work very well. And you have these new things, you know, like drones, things like that. I won't get into that. But we have to fight with the weapons that apply to the battlefields in which we're engaged. And the most important ones are in social media. And the most important purchase that is going on right now is
Followers.
TikTok. TikTok, number one. And I hope it goes through because it can be consequential. And the other one, what's the other one that's most important? X. That's very good. And, you know, so we have to talk to Elon. He's not an enemy. He's a friend. We should talk to him. Now, if we can get those two things, we get a lot. And I could go on other things, but that's not the point right now.
Yeah, that was done a day or two after he spoke at the General Assembly. He gathered a lot of sort of Christian Zionist, I hate this word, but influencers, young, another phrase I hate, young Generation Z people, right? And told them, we must get control of social media. TikTok, number one, right? I asked Kara about it. She said, because TikTok is what the journalists in Gaza, local journalists in Gaza, were using to get these real-time videos out, right? Another important...
Not only that, the youth in America. I was surprised to hear that 170 million Americans use TikTok. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just massive. Yeah. So they're losing their narrative.
Right. Interesting little side point here. Netanyahu in that clip, I'm amazed at how unself-conscious he was saying this, right? We must get control. Controlling the narrative for the sake of Israel depends on social media. Think about that for a moment, Thomas. It's an acknowledgement that mainstream media are just gone, right? They're what's my word? They're ghosts of what they once were, you know.
They are compromised, and everybody knows it.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
Yeah. And there's more of this coming. Anyway, Zionization.
Yeah. I love this word, and I love this word, and I will reuse it. Yeah,
absolutely.
Now, what I wanted to say is, I looked into the background of this whole thing. Yeah, so I don't know if you know that Larry Ellison, the second richest man of the world, is of course the Oracle founder or co-founder. Yeah, and his consortium now controls TikTok.
TikTok.
Right? And
by way of his son, they're going to get control of the networks. Paramount, CBS, and so on and so on. It goes on and on. CBS is about to hire this dreadful Zionist freak, Barry Weiss. Background here. Barry Weiss was an opinion writer at the New York Times, opinion editor at the New York Times, and she was forced out because of her obnoxious views, right? And went off and started something called the Free Press. She's about to be hired by CBS. She's an arch Zionist, as in some kind of senior editorial role, maybe even editorial director. I'm not sure. This is what I'm talking about. The media, the universities, Hollywood, and Washington, they're all Zionized. When you think about it, we must ask to, and Europe has its own variant of this disease. When you think about it, to what extent is Zionism, after all these centuries, however you want to measure it, actually coming to a point where it's controlling the Western world?
You say something really, really critical, and we are going on very, very thin ice if we pursue this line of argumentation. Jews controlling the world. You are right away. Your head is being chopped off if you even go in this direction. Yeah,
We
but
must
if
not
we
be
look,
afraid of that kind of thing anymore. I didn't say anything about Jews. I'm talking about Zionists, the Zionist
yes,
machine, the Zionist cause. Okay,
yeah.
it's very systematic.
Yeah, and there's a massive and a fundamental difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. How much Netanyahu wants to conflate those two, I completely get it, because then any legitimate critic against the state of Israel can be brushed off as anti-Semitism. So I completely get it. So it's very important that you point this out.
Yeah, Netanyahu is one of the most consequential enemies of Judaism in the world today, right? It's Israeli ideology, the Jewish state, the home of world Jewry, etc. There's no difference between Israel and Judaism. I don't accept that, but we are invited to accept it. And I'm working on an essay now about all this, right? Uh, and I'm going to make the argument, not to preempt myself. We need world Jewry to speak. We need to hear from world Jewry about Zionism and Israel and the Jewish religion, okay, and the difference between them. We have wonderful groups. Jewish Voice, right, is very important. Uh, these people stand up and say, we are not Israel, we are not Zionists, we are not genocidists, we are not anti-Palestinian, and we are not in favor of Netanyahu, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Jewish Voice for Peace, your listeners can look it up. They're extremely impressive, admirable, courageous people. That's what we need. Note the name, Jewish Voices. We need Jewish voices to tell us how to think about these things, because the Israelis are very, very busy blurring our minds about all of it.
I interviewed Emeritus Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro. He lives in the US. I
I
interviewed
love
him.
that guy. I saw him
I
a
inter
couple of times. He's the one who
I,
first said he did an appearance for an excellent group in Washington called Committee for the Republic, right? Uh, and he said, "I don't need Israel to make me feel secure. I'm an American. I feel perfectly secure here. Uh, Israel, Zionism, is not what I'm about." It, Thomas, it's just what I was trying to say a moment ago. We need to hear Jews say things like this to
he
keep the
made
air
one
clear.
he made one statement. You're gonna love this. He said, and with this words here, Zionism is burning Jews for fuel. Yeah, and it's so true.
Very good expression. Exactly his point. Yeah, yeah. He's an important guy because because of
Amazing,
what he's
amazing.
saying and who is saying it.
Yeah.
You know?
Coming briefly back to TikTok, I pulled up my own article here. Erika Mindl, because I forgot her name. Erika Mindl is the new public policy manager for hate speech. Now, if you look her up, even according to the Jewish Insider, Mindl is a former U.S. Department contractor who worked for Ambassador Deborah Lipstadt, the U.S. Special Envoy tasked with combating
Yeah,
anti-Semitism.
yeah.
She has a deeper background and affiliations with Israel, and he's now the so-called anti-hate speech manager on TikTok,
Well, good
right?
luck, huh?
So exactly. Zionization of America. Yes. So I invite everybody to look into this conglomerate, Oracle conglomerate,
Mm.
or look into Larry, that's the father, Larry Ellison, and his son, David Ellison, who now is the CEO of a massive, massive media conglomerate, which
Mhm.
not only brings you the news, but I mean, also entertainment is propaganda, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
it's almost, they're covering this from all angles. And despite all of that, and correct me if I'm wrong, I have the feeling that slowly, 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 the tides are turning.
There's no question of that. The public opinion, look at all the polls conducted. It doesn't matter who conducted them, right? All the polls point in the same direction. Yeah, the tide is turning quite swiftly against Israel. I've argued since the autumn of 2023, Israel is going to overplay its hand here, right? And that was quite some time before it became as gruesome as we have it now in Gaza, right? Before, as my wife Kara is documenting, the same thing is happening in the West Bank. I think what they're doing in the West Bank, not to digress, but what they're doing in the West Bank is exactly what they're doing in Gaza, but they learned the lesson. Okay, Gaza, full out, full out barbarity, jet planes, tanks. No, we do it a village at a time with settlers walking through on their feet, a lot less noise, no jet planes, no artillery, just burn the village and chase the people away. And we have another 2 kilometers of what we're going to call Judea, right? But long before all this started, the West Bank is going to be as bad as Gaza. Right? Um, I figured the Israelis were going to overplay their hand, and I think they have. Um, but uh, what we have now with our news last night and this morning that the Israelis have intervened in international waters against that flotilla. It's another defiance of international law. And the Spanish and the Italians, who had naval vessels out there, have stepped back. I, I thought about it this morning while I was showering. I thought, what is going to stop this? What is going to stop this? No question of principle, law, debate. Gustavo Petro said at the UN General Assembly a number of important things, but he's an interesting fellow. Small nation, big voice. He said, we need an international force, meaning a UN organized force, to intervene, to break the blockade and stop the genocide. What's the core point here? armed intervention is all that's going to work, and we've got to face that. Armed intervention and more of what's going on in Rome, Brussels, Berlin, these mass protests, the footage is incredible. Hundreds of thousands of people. We need more of it to force the hands of those who purport to govern us. Forced.
While yeah, whilst at the same weekend, like was it last weekend, I believe, yeah, the same weekend that Keir Starmer announced that the UK will recognize Palestine as a state, I was sitting with the former foreign minister of Malta, interviewing him, discussing exactly that. Yeah, a very incredibly knowledgeable, kind, generous, but very lucid and very sharp-minded person. And he said exactly that. What is it going to do? And more crucially, what exactly was recognized? Which Palestine? The Palestine now? Like a Swiss cheese hold out? I mean, the West Bank with, I don't know, 200 settlements? 250,000 settlers already in the West Bank. What is being recognized?
250,000. Correct your number, Thomas. More like 600,000.
600,000 even.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
So what
rising.
is what is being recognized? 1967? What? Yeah. So this is all just tokens. This is where I want to go with this. Is these guys, Keir Starmer and co. Doesn't matter in which government. Yeah, these guys they feel the pressure. They recognize there's a massive and growing gap between the population and their so-called leadership. And now all they're doing is they're sticking themselves a nice sticker here. We are doing something against the genocide. Yeah, even this terminology is now more and more
Acceptable.
seemingly
Yeah.
acceptable. Exactly.
Mm,
Yeah,
mm.
but does it really do something?
Well, uh, it's it's not a comfortable question, okay? The recognitions at the UN were widely denounced afterwards by some very honorable people. A mockery, meaningless, a despicable sham, and so on. But I went back to a notion we used to have in America when there was something one could seriously call a left. Uh, Critical support. Okay, these recognitions are in many ways very hollow. Right, the British and I think the French are going have imposed all kinds of preposterous conditions uh, that basically strip the meaning of the term sovereignty. They're all talking about a two-state solution, which is impossible. Um, okay, but is the world a better place? Uh, would the world be a better place if they folded their arms and refused, or not? One. Two, the entire Western Bloc, apart from the United States, now recognizes. I'm not sure there's a single exception. If there are, if there are any exceptions, they are not many. The Western Bloc has now joined the global majority. 81% of the UN membership now recognizes. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Right? Okay. Third, um, the Anglosphere. All right. I assume your listeners know what that term means. Has all the members of the Anglosphere have recognized except the United States. Even clients like Australia and Canada, right? Uh, American isolation America is increasingly isolated on this point. That's a good thing. I approve of American isolation, or the isolation of America, to be clear, right, on foreign policy questions, right. And fourth point, all that was going on, the denunciations of the Israelis in the General Assembly were extremely vigorous this year. The walkout when Netanyahu spoke, they're always fun to watch. This one was the best of all. There was nobody
Massive,
there.
massive. Yeah.
And finally, all the things that were going on outside the GA, Gustavo Petro, his remark I've already quoted, we need an international force, okay? A small country making a big point, and a head of state member of the United Nations has now called for an armed force. That's my term, net positive. Okay. As I said in a column, since you and I arranged to talk, I'm not in the habit of approving of anything Keir Starmer or Macron says, but this is net positive. It's a step in the right direction. I stand open to argument on the point, right? I know everything that's wrong with these things, but better with them than without them. What do you think?
To paraphrase Evariste Bartolo, the former foreign minister of Malta, too little, too late, but better than nothing.
Yeah. Kara did something really wonderful. She she has a lot of contacts and friends in the West Bank now. She texted them and said, what do you think of these recognitions? Right? Remember, the name of her project is Palestinian Voices. Her intent is to, as she puts it, rehumanize Palestine, rehumanize a dehumanized population and give them voice. Okay, they all came back with replies. Some of them rather acid and bitter, but by and large, they said, well, it's a good thing, but it needs to be followed by action. That's all I'm saying, and I can. Kara's published that piece on the flautist. That's my position, right? I stand with them.
I have been in Jordan a couple of times. The second time was exactly when Iran's rockets the first time, also not this time, the first time flew over Jordan and hit Israel. Yeah? And it was so close that we could feel the impacts because the houses were shaking.
Really?
Now, I interviewed 4 top diplomats, one of which, again, a foreign minister, Dr. Marwan Mouasha, and all 4 of them told me the same concern. And that was before Trump announced it. They were concerned that Israel might try to get all Palestinians from Gaza and the West Bank pushing out into Jordan and into Egypt. Yeah, and that was before that Trump started to talk about his Riviera on, Riviera of the Middle East. Yeah, this kind of nonsense. So that showed me that Trump and his crew lack a fundamental understanding of the situation, because both governments in Egypt and in Jordan especially would fall. In Jordan it's even worse. They could kill the king because there's this not so, and I'm sure you have heard about this. There is this old argument, this Israeli argument, that Jordan is the true Palestinian state. So they are trying to push the Hashemite regime. They are trying to instigate a putsch, a Palestinian push in Jordan to get rid of the Hashemite house and install there the true Palestinian state. Yeah, and this is what they're really concerned about.
Yeah. I don't see any possibility of it, do you? And you make a larger point. This regime, the Trump regime, has no understanding of the world whatsoever, quite apart from the situation in Israel, Palestine, and Gaza, and West Asia altogether. No understanding of Russia, right? Not even really that great an understanding of Europe. But it hasn't been necessary. Boutros Ghali wrote his memoirs. Boutros Ghali, very admirable man, right? Very learned. And the Americans subverted his attempt to achieve a second term as Secretary General at the UN because he wasn't sufficiently pliant. And he wrote his memoirs. And in the very last pages, he says, diplomacy is for the weak nations. The strong have no need of it. Right? The same principle applies to just general understanding of other people. Americans have not, for a very long time, had any need to understand the rest of the world. They had sufficient power that removed that possibility. And now in the 21st century, this failure to understand others is becoming a serious source of weakness. Power alone is not going to carry in the 21st century, I don't think.
I have a nice point to make because I just saw it. So Trump appointed his buddy and neighbor in Mar-a-Lago, I forgot his name, it's a businessman with absolutely no political skills, as the ambassador in Belgium. And I just before the interview, I just saw a little interview from this guy. He has no clue about politics, no clue about Belgium whatsoever, and he doesn't speak like 99% of the Americans only speaks English. Yeah, so he said, yeah, it would be nice to speak, and I'm paraphrasing here. Yeah, so yeah, it would be nice to speak French, but it's not needed. Trump wants everybody has to understand English. First of all, the ignorance, the prepotence, yeah, in such a statement, because it's not about Belgium has to understand you. It's about you as an ambassador to understand the country that you are in. Yeah. I mean,
Exactly.
it's just unbelievable. And these kind of types are the inner circle of Trump. And I make a very, I said it before, but in a less strong phrasing, let's say. Hitler had exactly the same problem, so to speak. At the end, there was nobody left to really tell him what's true, what's not true, what's right, what's wrong, whatever. Yeah? And
Really?
Hitler was and is not the only dictator. Yeah, this is again. I used the word dictator. I shouldn't use it yet, at least. But this is a tendency of of personalities with an authoritarian streak. They only accept their own opinion. And Trump, this might be sooner or later. This might be the downfall of Trump. And then my question to you is now, I'm hearing, and I'm not sure if it's true. Let's say something. I mean, Trump is what, 87? I forgot now. How old is Trump? 80 plus.
Yeah.
80 plus. Yeah. So this guy could have a heart attack tomorrow morning. So who would become? I mean, I know it's the vice president, but could it be that Hegseth becomes down the line becomes president in that scenario?
The vice president, first of all, And
Yeah, short term,
the
till the next
liberal
election.
the
Yeah.
liberals in America are quite nervous about J.D. Vance because he's young, presentable. I called him Trumpism with a human face, right? He could be elected in 2028. After the vice president, I think the Speaker of the House would become president in some calamitous
Uh,
circumstance where the president, the vice president are all gone, right? There's a constitutional line, and I'm betraying the lapse of my civics
no, I
understanding.
understand it. I understand it. But I mean, outside of this, yes, till the next election, it's the vice president. But between those two, could have Hegseth a chance? Or a
Hegseth?
personality? I mean, yeah,
No, I think
no, okay.
Hegseth's making a quite serious fool of himself at the Defense Department, but most Americans aren't looking. If he were to go for some, and he's never been elected to anything, if he were to stand for some prominent national office, he wouldn't last. He wouldn't last a few months, I don't think. He's too stupid. The reality of Hegseth is, I find myself using this word very often, and not very surprised to do so. He's extremely stupid, you know, um, and I think he plays to a certain streak of nostalgia in the military, but it wouldn't work. If he were to run for office, is Pete Hegseth supposed to have ideas about how to run the economy, major issues having to do with whatever, taxes or foreign relations or something? Out of the question, Thomas. I
But
wouldn't
let me
worry
ask you
about it.
this. Let me ask you this. Is not exactly what you just said, is it not also true for Trump? Exactly what you just said? And he is president.
I, Trump Trump does something Hegseth pretends to do but can't. Trump stands for the disabused and neglected white working class in America. He's managed to put himself in the position as their kind of totemic leader. Okay, he once said during his 2016 campaign, "I'm just like those people," meaning uneducated working class people from Ohio or wherever, right? Kentucky. I'm just like those people, except I have more money, and that's how he is seen uh, among the people who voted for him. And remember, in America, there's very little uh, class awareness in America. Um, Not as much as you might think. These people who elected Trump, a steel worker who used to make $28 an hour and now drives a FedEx truck for $12 an hour or something, right? Um, these people, they don't stand against wealth or the structure that wealth, produces wealth in America. They just want to have it themselves. Wow, look how rich that guy is. I want to be like him. It's not it's not class consciousness, and certainly not class conflict. Well, it is a form of class conflict, but it's not the same as European class consciousness, what you have in Italy as we speak, and in France, is quite different. It's more like class envy, right? It's very different consciousness. I hope I haven't lost you on that point, but
No, not at all. Not at all. I think I completely understand what you mean. It always puzzled me how exactly that happened. That I don't know, millionaire, billionaire, he claims to be a billionaire, I don't know. Suddenly, becomes kind of the guardian for the lower educated, white, shrinking middle class.
yeah.
This in itself is quite a feat. I have to give him credit.
And
This is quite a feat.
he's got these people supporting him uh, diametrically, maybe diabolically too, diametrically against their own interests. Right? Years ago, a very fine writer named Thomas Frank wrote a book called "What's the Matter with Kansas?" The question he posed in the book was, why do ordinary Americans, middle class, working class Americans, constantly vote against their own interests? It's a phenomenon, right? Thomas Frank, what's the matter with Kansas? Very good book. Listen,
But you could,
I want to mention,
yeah,
I want to ask you if you'd like to return to the topic of media and their relationship with power,
happy to.
because it's it's very important point at this stage in the
Please.
proceedings, right? Um, uh, I go back a century, a little more history here for your listeners, to the 1920s when America was becoming a mass society, urbanized and so on. And there was there was a very interesting debate between Walter Lippmann, the high priest of American elitism and the cult of the expert, and John Dewey, the pragmatist and educator. Okay, they actually didn't have a debate the way we mean the term. They both wrote books on the same topic and then reviewed each other's books. So it shorthand the Lippmann-Dewey debate, right? They weren't actually debates, but they amounted to debates. Okay, Walter Lippmann argued that the role of the press was to serve as an appendage of sequestered elites and to convey their decisions downward like messengers to the great broad masses, right? And the great broad masses had too much on their minds to take any serious interest in policy or the direction of the country. These questions should be determined by these, as I put them, sequestered elites, and the press should just carry the message downward. That was Lippmann. Dewey said, just a moment, it's true that American policy is formulated and executed by elites, and there's not much we can do about that. But the public must be properly informed of all perspectives on any given question so that the public can make determinations as to what the country should do. Right? Lippmann's famous phrase for the press was the manufacture of consent. Okay, uh, that phrase comes down to us. Everybody knows it, right? Dewey, basically Lippmann. I had this in a column. It's in the book actually at great length. Lippmann was calling for what he called democratic realism, which is a nonsense phrase for an undemocratic society, basically. And Dewey was calling for not less democracy, but more. Okay. Those are the two positions of these people, and I'm sorry if I went on a little long, but we have had ever since a century now. Um, ever since then, we've had the question of where does the press stand? Is it a Lippmannite press or the sort of press Dewey favored? Is it an appendage of the elite, or does it stand as an independent pole of power addressing its audiences, readers and viewers? That's the question.
So what's your answer? What's your answer?
During the Cold War, all right, during the Cold War, the press turned itself into uh, a herd of Lippmannites. They stood with power, a function of power, uh, an instrument of power. And that held until the ferment of the 60s and 70s, when there was a little shift in direction and the press started to show signs of regaining its identity as an independent pole of power, a fourth estate as it is in the history books, right? Then came 2001, and the attacks on Washington and New York in September of 2001 transformed the situation all over again. And what we have now, the mainstream media are straight ahead, without exceptions, Lippmannites, if I've explained the term properly. There's no question, and these people, New York Times in the lead, but not only, right? They think they are doing a very good job. They think they are doing an excellent job, and they are doing an excellent job if you accept that the job is to just convey messages from the elite to the population. This is what's going on now. And this is the most fundamental feature of independent media, is that it does not partake of this, and it gives meaning to the word independent. What is independent of what? Let's just ask simply. Independent of power. That's all I wanted to put in on this point. It's absolutely central to the media landscape today.
In relation to media and power, and since you mentioned 9/11, I read studies that I forgot exactly the exact amount, but 90% of Americans do not know that in New York at 9/11, a third building collapsed, World Trade Center 7.
Yeah.
It not only collapsed, it collapsed into its own footprint. It collapsed symmetrical into its own
Like
footprint.
a controlled detonation.
Officially based on an office fire who has weakened one of the 91 columns. Okay, so media and power. Interestingly, I come back to the BBC. You will not believe this. 20 minutes before this collapse, which was, the likelihood of this building collapsing based on office fire is close to zero. Yeah. 20 minutes before the collapse, a BBC reporter reported, with the building still standing in her background, that World Trade Center 7 has collapsed.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. Apparently that's only a few hundred yards away from where the World Trade Center towers were. And it seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attacks. We'll probably find out more now about that from our correspondent, Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy. There's almost a sense downtown in New York behind me, down by the World Trade Centers, of just an area completely closed off as the rescue workers try to do their job.
Now I'm asking, not you, but I'm asking in general. Because BBC said, we got the information up from, I believe it was Reuters, and Reuters said, oops, sorry, we made a mistake. Now, the likelihood, the mathematical likelihood that that not only that this building collapses on its own in free fall, that's actually the argument from the professor from the Alaska University who did a 7-year research on it. He said any sophomore from the university with a stopwatch can prove that this cannot be a spontaneous collapse because there's an element of free fall. Yeah. So a building cannot collapse in free fall. There's friction. Yeah. Okay.
I see.
So first of all, that the building collapses. Second, that someone like in a casino guesses this $1 billion coincidence, right, and bets on the money, right, that it then in retrospect 20 minutes later really collapses. Yeah. So coming back to, I don't know, I don't want to go into conspiracy, but something seriously is wrong here in relation to that story. Again, I want to link this with media and power.
Yeah.
Because it was from day one, the narrative was clear. It was unisono. It was absolutely clear what the narrative in relation to 9/11 was till today, mainly till today.
Yeah.
Again, media and power. You repeat it often enough, and it becomes the truth.
Now, I have heard about this BBC report, right? And my question was, I went along with the official narrative of 9/11 for a long time, right? And then there were doubters, okay, but these people were dismissed as conspiracy theorists, and I have a point to make about that term. And then I thought, wait a minute, Building 7, that began to turn my mind a little. And I thought, I want to see the timestamps on that BBC report, because could it have been forged by people making trouble, right? But you've clarified that. The BBC report came from Reuters, and Reuters acknowledged that it had made an error. So the question of the timing of those documents is clear, right? My mind now is, again, I'm very cautious about overstatement and so on, right? My mind now is my mind is open in a way it wasn't before. I want to hear more about 9/11, right? And a few years ago, I would have been dismissed as a 9/11 truther, right? I think more needs to be said. The Building 7 thing is quite persuasive that something, there's a lot
It's
of,
the Achilles.
yeah. Now, if I may finish up here by mentioning, talking about this term conspiracy theory, right? To call something a conspiracy theory is effectively a form of dismissal. If you call somebody a conspiracy theorist, you've declared that person unserious, haven't you? Right? And this took, the term's been around a long time, everybody knows, but this took on a new connotation during the Russiagate mess here, right? It's just a conspiracy theory, right? CIA involvement and so on. What is being said when one uses the term conspiracy theory? First of all, the suggestion is, or the implication is, there are no such things as conspiracies. if you call something a conspiracy theory dismissively, what you're saying is there's no such thing as conspiracies under any circumstance, right? Second, and I think more important, Thomas, you are saying the orthodox presentation of this event is real and you cannot question it. What is presented, the world of appearances, is the world you must accept as real. If you don't, you're outside the fence posts. And our term for people like you is conspiracy theorists. Now, once we name you a conspiracy theorist, you may as well go home because you're never going to be taken seriously. This is really quite true. I'm being a touch reductionist, but I think the important point for your listeners to understand about this term are 2 points. One, the suggestion that there's no such thing as a conspiracy theory is out and out preposterous. And number two, the use of that term is enforcing an orthodox version of reality that we are all compelled by the force of that term to accept without question. That's why I can't bear that term, right?
It was invented after the John F. Kennedy assassination by
Yeah,
the CIA.
that's
Yeah.
right. Now, we live, the irony here is, and the reason this term has, I think the reason this term has acquired the connotation it has, is because we live in an absolute jungle of conspiracies at this point, and they all have to be hidden. We touched on one already. I'm damned if the Kirk assassination doesn't involve a conspiracy of some kind. You know? Anyway.
Patrick, I just see I overstayed my welcome by almost half an hour. And I could go on and on, yeah. And I will not promise you that you don't hear from me again. I will
No, I
not, yeah.
insist. I would be delighted to do this again, Thomas. It's a nice
Abs
conversation. Excellent. Yeah.
absolutely,
Productive.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
Patrick, it was my honor, really, and I mean it, talking to you.
And
I wish you
mine
all the best.
and mine talking to you, Thomas.